Hello and welcome to Perspectives webinar series. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes to join us. See people filing in. Always a good sign. I'll go ahead and get us started with today's icebreaker. You might want to head over to the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. And also, today is National Plant a Flower Day. Would love to know, what is your favorite flower? So where are you from and what's your favorite flower? That's hard to say. Favorite flower. Let's see, we got Alabama coming in. We got Austin, Texas with daisies. Love it. Another daisy. Popular. Some lilacs in here. Yep, California. Got tulips. Seen a couple tulips. Hibiscus. There you go. Fun to say as well. See, Dallas and Jacksonville, poppies and lilacs. This always makes me so happy. I always run the risk of just forgetting to do the whole panel and just reading what everybody loves so much. What do you think for our panelists too? What's your favorite flower? One pop into mind?
I'm on the hibiscus train.
Hibiscus, that's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know. I might do it iris.
Oh, God, that's a good one.
Pretty popular in this part of the country.
I'm a meditator, so I'm going to go with lotus. But
there you go.
Dahlias, hydrangeas. Hydrangea would be a good one. I live on Cape Cod. That's a good one for us too. Awesome. If everybody's just wondering what the heck is going on around here, we're just getting ready for some people to join up as they've come from their other meetings. So love to see where people are dialing in from and what your favorite flower is. Cherry blossoms from Pittsburgh. Nice. Well, here's a very specific one from Houston. Middle Mist Red Camellia. Am I saying that right? Is it Camellia? Nice. Blue bonnets. All right, we are at 2:02. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Matt Pepsel, and I am very, very pleased and excited for today's topic, Better Work, Better World, all about how to transform business into a force for good. I am joined today by Andrew Herbeck. Andrew is the Learning and Development Specialist for Habitat for Humanity of Omaha, the #1 ranked Habitat affiliate in the nation. He has over a decade of experience in the nonprofit sector in the areas of education and organizational design. Andrew, thanks so much for being with us today. Next up, we have Catherine Warren. Catherine serves as the Chief Operating Officer of Kid Glove, a marketing agency and certified B Corporation that helps nonprofits and purpose-driven businesses amplify their impact. At Kid Glove, Catherine takes a people-first approach to process and operations. Catherine, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, if you've been in the audience, you've been following Perspectives for a while, you know that we normally have a third panelist, but today's topic is so near and dear to my heart that I'm going to be serving as both your host and your third panelist all at once. Don't try this at home. And as such, I'll go ahead and do something I never do, which is read a little bit of my bio as well, as if I were a panelist. And I'll do it in a cringy way because I have to just read it as it's written. Dr. Matt Pepsel is the author of Expand the Circle, Enlighten Leadership for Our New World of Work, and host of the Lead the People podcast. He is a part-time faculty member at Boston College, where he teaches in the areas of leadership, human resources, and business spirituality. So there you go. Thank you, team, for joining us today. We're going to pull up the slides, and I'll do just a little bit of housekeeping here. Yes, the webinar is being recorded, and it will be sent to you by email in the follow-up. And you're going to have questions for our panelists as we go. So you're going to want to use the Q&A button inside of the Zoom. I always say that if you put it in the Q&A, we will see it. If you put it in the chat, we may see it. But please use that Q&A button for the audience Q&A part of the show. And you're going to want to stick around to the end. We're going to have some bonus resources. We'll tell you how to get in touch with our panelists, and we'll give you a preview of next month's webinar as well. Awesome. So today's topic, we're talking all about this business as a force for good. Sometimes it's referred to as stakeholder capitalism. I always pull just a couple of headlines that kind of frame the conversation for us. This one talked about the Boeing strike, for example. Cautionary tale, what happens when shareholder primacy vanquishes a far healthier mindset of multi-stakeholder capitalism. So that was a nod for this sort of more holistic view. But it's not universally celebrated, I would say. Here's the second one, talking about driving a stake through stakeholder capitalism. It's pretty graphic, talking about how it demotes shareholders to one of many groups that companies need to prioritize. So there's talking about, sometimes I talk about competing goals or competing agendas. And then I included this third one, Gen Z wants employers with a positive impact. mostly because it says that 18 to 27-year-olds are looking beyond the pay packet when it comes to choosing work. I had never heard that term before, and I loved it. The pay packet, very cool. But the sentiment there is obviously what we're speaking about the most. So it's pretty clear that there's varying opinions about it. We're going to talk a lot about the practical aspects. We'll set some more context through our panel discussion. But before we do that, I wanted to go ahead and pull up our Menti poll. We always talk about getting to know you a little bit better. So I've got a couple different questions for you. One is just a kind of an audience question here, which is, what is the size of your HR team? So we have the Menti there is linked in the chat. If you go to menti.com, you can also use the code at the top of the screen, which is there in numeric form. This first question, what's the size of your HR team? Anywhere from one person, you might be a solo practitioner, 2 to 4, 5 to 9, and 10 plus. Just trying to get us an understanding a little bit about the size of teams as we plan for future content needs. See a bunch coming in the chat. We'll harvest those as well and add them to the mix. Very good. We'll just give another quick few seconds for more answers to come in, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, let's go to the next Menti question here. So, how strong is your company's connection to the following stakeholders? So it's a little bit subjective. You're going to think about it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being super high. You can see the different stakeholders splayed out here on the screen. We have your customers and clients, definitely an important stakeholder group. What about vendors and suppliers? Your employees' families, the communities in which you operate, society or some sort of larger social cause, and then the planet. Mother Earth, sustainability. And what we're seeing here, I love this option of a Menti poll that shows us the distribution as well as the averages for people. And there's obviously no wrong answers, just a matter of curiosity as we get to know one another. It looks like customers and clients has a very strong connection, as we would expect. What do you think, panelists? Any other surprises or things you notice from looking at these results?
I think it's really cool how high up vendors are and community along
Yeah.
with those employees. You know, those are ones that sometimes get overlooked, especially the vendors piece of this. So great to see that.
Yeah, told you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. It looks like the vendor supplier connection is strong. It's encouraging.
Yeah, as a psychology nerd, I'm always looking at distributions too. So I see the society and social as kind of, you wouldn't even say bimodal, you'd say 3, 4 different lumps. So lots of different varying opinions there, which is totally understandable too. But this is really great view and helps us understand how, kind of where we're looking at when it comes to stakeholders. Let's go to one more Menti question, and then we'll kick over to our panel discussion. How does your organization highlight its positive impact on stakeholders? So a lot of different options here. Complete open text. We'll just see some of your responses as they come in. But what are some things you're doing to showcase both internally and externally how you're having a positive impact on something even beyond the firm? So we don't. There you go. Hits that one. But also I see a lot of videos on social. Very nice. Newsletters, ESG report. We're going to talk a little bit about reports, of course, the important role they play on our website. Sure. Engagement surveys like that. Lots of bulletins, newsletters for sure. Yeah. Town hall. Yeah. Let's talk about that in these town hall meetings. A value impact program. Not much on social media. I like that we're being frank and realistic about this. For sure. Community support and engagement. Yeah. I see an emoji in there. Awesome. Video, social media, meetings. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. A lot of great stuff in here. All right. Well, thank you so much for that input. We always like to hear from you, the audience, before we get into our panel discussion. But we'll go ahead and talk about one last piece of framing here, which is all around. A lot of times I'll put up the talent optimization framework here. This time I opted to go for what we refer to as the optimal outcome. So what are the things that we're looking to produce, I would say, in our organizations for every individual, every team, for the entire company? Clearly, we need performance, whether it's job performance, a team charter, et cetera. That's why we're in business. But we also want to make sure that employees experience high levels of engagement and well-being. Career growth, are they learning new skills? Do they feel like they're making progress in their careers? And then finally, impact on all the different things we've been talking about. And clearly I've underlined that one because that's what we're going to focus on here in particular. It's very exciting for me that we're talking about this because we don't always have a chance to discuss this topic. So I'm really excited for today's conversation. So without further ado, as they say, we'll get right into our panel discussion. And Andrew, maybe I'll get us, you can get us started with this one. I've used the term stakeholder capitalism. I want to talk about a definition just to kind of give us a little bit of a baseline here. What is stakeholder capitalism in your view, and how does it differ from some of the other types of models that you see out there that have dominated business for so long?
Yeah, my mind goes directly towards the client or our audience. I know stakeholders can include a variety of different groups like benefactors or employees or groups like that. But when I think of stakeholder capitalism, it's the audience. And I talk about it in terms of human flourishing. So if a business or a nonprofit is really focused on investing in human flourishing, that's going to be good for business. But it's not, the reverse isn't always true. So human flourishing is always good for business, but business isn't always fruitful for human flourishing. And so as we talk about impact, if we can keep that humanness at the forefront, I think that really helps our work, I guess.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Catherine, same question for you. How do you define stakeholder capitalism, and maybe compare and contrast it to other types of approaches?
Yeah, so agree with Andrew. Absolutely. I think the results that we're seeing of businesses going, okay, wait a second, our traditional ways of working are not working. And so I think stakeholder capitalism came from the fact that businesses realized if we have happier, healthier, more balanced people behind these products, our products are going to be higher quality and we're going to get more done in less time, right? Because we have focused, accountable people behind our product now. And not only just employees, right? Vendors, customers, all of those people combined in a more balanced space creates a higher quality product. And I think one thing social media showed us a lot of, as you see a lot of your advertising on social media, is high quality wins the game a lot right now, right? You have to have that higher quality piece to your product to show off on social media, to win those more marketing driven competitions for your product. So to me, it's all about balance.
Yeah, and I'll build on those points. And when I think about it a lot, I always counsel my clients to think about interconnectedness between three systems, as I refer to them. One is the production system, the one we think about probably the most, which is how the work actually gets done. But then also the people system, as we've talked about, and also the purpose system. And to me, these things are much more interconnected than we often stop to think about. So when we enhance one, and Andrew, you made the great point, it's like when people are flourishing, the business will flourish, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. And when we also look at the nature of, for example, consumerism, there was really a dramatic change that if you come out and you are seen as, for example, harming the environment, don't expect that a certain swath of the consumer base is going to want to do business with you. People want to spend money with companies they want to do business with. I think increasingly employees want to work for companies that they want to be associated with too. So that's really, really important in terms of how all this stuff fits together. So I think we're really hitting on the points that when we think about stakeholder capitalism, it might be kind of a term we don't use all that often, but when we think about all the different types of groups that are involved when we're thinking about the impact that we're having, then that's kind of the basic way to at least frame the conversation. But Catherine, maybe I'll ask you this follow-up question, which is this observation I've had that since the pandemic has ended. Certainly, we've seen this when millennials began to enter the workforce. There was a big push towards sustainability. Gen Z brought another focus on social causes as well. But what specific programs or what specific changes kind of within that vein of these modernization, if you will, of the workforce have you seen and you can chat with us about?
Well, I love this question because I just went to a conference last week and the question was asked on a Menti pool. What would it cost, right? What additional salary would you need to go to a company that doesn't focus on its stakeholders or that does have a more traditional focus? And 70% of a room of hundreds of people said, no amount of money would get me to work for our company. And this was in that Gen Z millennial. Even the highest number, I think, was an additional $250,000 in salary. And the vast majority of that room said, nope, that's not enough for me to go somewhere where this is not, where people aren't thinking about their people or their vendors or their customers or community. So I think that's a huge piece to remember in our recruiting world. I wear an HR hat also. However, I think what you're seeing in companies in general is they're aligning to a purpose, whether it's a more traditional product or not, right? You used to only see that more in the nonprofit world, in Andrew's world. Now you see it in most every company, right? If you really want to get your product out into that Gen Z millennial world, you have to align yourself with a purpose, whether that's a purpose specific to your product or one that just makes sense with your business acumen, but you have to align yourself.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Andrew, what do you think? Have you seen specific changes or programs kind of related to this modernization of employee appetite?
Yeah, before I kind of respond with my own answer, I love what Catherine said. The connection with purpose, how that's shifting not just in a nonprofit sector, but into the business sector as well. I think there's a positive impact from that, but what I'm afraid of sometimes is businesses do that. It's almost like a facade that we put up, and it's not genuine. It's like, oh yeah, well, in order to keep up in the market, whatever, we got to have an attachment to purpose or whatever. But then it just becomes, like I said, kind of a facade, and it's not coming from a genuine source, I guess. So maybe something for us, for our groups to think about, when we lead those kind of initiatives, is it, to look good on a piece of paper or an ad or promotion or whatever, or is it coming from a genuine place where we really genuinely want to connect our work to purpose? But in terms of what I've seen, if we're thinking of millennials and Gen Z, we were raised, you've got two generations that were raised with the idea that we can go out and change the world. And we took that to heart. So when we grew up and we entered the workplace, we tried that. And a lot of us got burnt out, realizing, wow, this is too much sometimes. And so a lot of millennials in particular, what I see, we're dialing back. We're trying to get more focused, more intentional. We can't do everything, but what can we do that's meaningful, that's purposeful? And so I see that as a positive shift, focus rather than broad engagement as a business or a nonprofit, trying to focus in our efforts, quality over quantity, I guess.
Yeah, and for
I
my
love
part,
that Andrew said that, because Andrew, self-proclaimed millennial, sees through those businesses that are attaching themselves to a purpose where it's not genuine. And I think that's a really important point too, is, if it's not an authentic move, it's probably not a move to make, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
whether
very.
that's,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, whether that's an employee or whether it's a consumer, trust is a lot bigger of an issue these days. And there's a lot of really smart, wise consumers and employees out there. And so we gotta step up our game.
Yeah, it's so true. And the example I always use in that vein is when you go to the hotel and it says, "Oh, hang up your towel if you don't want us to wash it every day." And I'm like, "Okay, is that for the planet or is that to save money? I can't help but go there." And I think it's just a pretty obvious example on the consumer side. The worst feeling in the world is when you're a candidate, you accept a job offer because you heard good things, you read things on the website, you show up and you're like, "It was just talk," and you're like, "Oh no, now I'm stuck." And we can't have that. I've seen the same sort of evolution that we've been talking about, and I don't think it was just it's not just the millennial workers and Gen Z as well. I've seen this from post-pandemic workers, where it's just a values reprioritization, looking for alignment of values, and looking for something more from work. And in the book that I mentioned earlier, Expand the Circle, I referred to this as the three B's of being, belonging, something bigger than myself. Those are the things that people seem to have evolved toward wanting from work, just as work itself has evolved, but our structures of work haven't. And in fact, I call them the killer bees because when those needs aren't met, it kills our productivity, our performance, our intent to stay. So to me, everything has changed about the world of work except our structures of how we do that work oftentimes. So this is where I think it's risky if we don't continue to that type of evolution. But the business world, I will say, has a reasonable expectation for things like performance, productivity. This implies metrics. This implies obviously financial performance. If we don't run a profitable business, we'll be out of business. So we can't begrudge the business for looking to make sure that its needs are met. But I wonder, Andrew, if you might tell me a little bit about thinking about measuring impact, because as business people, we really care about measurement. But if we want to measure something beyond just financial performance alone, how do we do that? How are you seeing organizations do that? And how might they influence either the long-term strategy, the way we make decisions, take action, et cetera?
Yeah, I think just a preface as well, a lot of my responses are coming from my personal experience in different work settings, but this response will come from Habitat for Humanity of Omaha in particular. And so I think it's going to be different from company to company, organization to organization. But what I see in our Habitat Omaha context, well, actually, really in general, if you look at any metric of human flourishing, education, healthcare, et cetera, safe, stable, affordable housing is the single common denominator. And so when we are measuring our impact in the housing industry, we're looking at things like the longevity of homeownership. So we try to track foreclosures for our clients. We have a very robust education process for our clients, home buyer education, things like that. And from our research, even a simple home buyer class reduces foreclosure by at least 30%. And so we invest in things like that. We look at our impact on advocacy. So a huge part of what Habitat does isn't just building houses and helping people to become homeowners, but it's legal advocacy, community engagement, things like that. And so we track our laws changing because of our work. Here in Nebraska, we've got a lobby day coming up. And so we can tangibly look at policies that are being set. We're actually introducing policies and laws. And so that's part of how we're tracing our impact, I guess. But that's a little bit different than just purely revenue or profit, you know?
Yeah. Catherine, I might ask you to pick up where Andrew left off. What do you think about measurement and measuring impact?
So I'm curious how many people watching this webinar are familiar with B corporations. Because if you are a profit-driven business, as we are at Kid Glove, there is a system called a certified B corporation, which we are, which is basically an audit system to prove that you are doing business as a force for good, right? That you're here for purpose as much as you are for profit. It is a huge audit process where you're basically proving your concern with your governance, your community, and the environment, right? So it's about your people, it's about the community that you're in, and about the planet, and how are you taking care of them while turning a profit, because a profit is what gives everyone jobs and all the things you need to prove the other points of this. It's a huge audit process. It took us 9 months to go through it the first time. So if you want to measure your impact, even if you never go through and submit the form and go through the process, even taking the impact assessment will help you gauge where you're at and where you're headed. B corporations also have to recertify every 4 years. And so that requires you to stay on your game. And the goal is to improve your score every time, right? So once you're a B corporation, you create an impact report that has scores for each of your areas, plus goals on how you're going to improve in those areas the next time that you recertify. So I don't know of another tool out in the world, and I'm sure there are, that measures impact as much as that B corporation certification does.
Yeah, it's incredible too when people are publishing their impact reports, many cases year over year over year. So if you find a B Corp in your local community or in your industry or whatever it might be, you take an active interest, you can see the types of things that they're going on record publicly and saying that they're doing to advance, promote. So I've seen everything from internal promotions to the nature of sustainability outcomes and all these things. So it's very rigorous and it's very transparent and is very powerful, I think. For my part, I'll throw in that I like to think differently about formal measures like we've been talking about around impact reports and measurements and lobby, et cetera. We have these inside our businesses too. We have dashboards that help us measure things and create transparency, at least internally. We also do formal surveys. A lot of times I saw engagement surveys, for example, show up in the Menti poll as well. And those are important to do those things because they give us a lot of consistency, a lot of objectivity. But I think something that gets overlooked sometimes are the informal measures too, the check-ins. Whether I'm checking in with my team or whether I'm checking in with a one-on-one person on my team, I think there's an opportunity for me as the team leader to ask questions, for example. So when we looked at vendors, and Catherine, you made the comment, you were pleased to see that vendors showed up as an important stakeholder group in our Menti poll. If we start asking questions about, how's the relationship going with our consultants who are working on our Salesforce.com account? Well, I don't really talk to them that much. Well, why not? Take an active interest in sort of, what we could be doing better to help them help us, things like this. Or what sort of impact are we having? Where have they found success in their own career? Have you ever been working with a vendor and they came to you and said that they got promoted and you're just as excited as you would have been for one of your own employees? Like, these are the types of things that are about relationships. Lots of different examples, but I think that we've all been giving some examples around those metrics, and measurement's an important part of this. Otherwise, we run the risk of what Andrew, you had shared a little bit earlier. Easy to say, hard to prove. We need to do both. We need to say it, what our intention is, but we also need to prove it. And Catherine, I'll ask you this question as a follow-up. So clearly something has changed relatively recently where we saw that we shifted, sometimes I like to say, from growth at all costs to a little bit more efficient growth. So there's been a lot of cost containment exercises. Some have been slight, some have been quite aggressive, but there's always this trade-off between the long term and then the short term, and trying to balance that can always be tricky. So what sort of advice might you have for how we can approach this need to balance short-term interests and oftentimes financial interests for the long-term interests that come along with stakeholder capitalism?
Yeah. So I think that if you take care of your people, and if they understand and feel that they are part of this team, they will feel more accountable to you, they will feel more loyal to you, and they will feel more ingrained in your product or whatever you're selling, right? And so I think what that creates on the other side is there are times where we all have to focus on short-term benefits, right? And short-term needs. Now you have a team of people that are in it with you and that are going to say, hey, we are ready to come with you. Yes, we're going to have to focus on profit solely for the next month or whatever. We're going to have to take a piece of business we wouldn't have otherwise. If you take care of your people and make them a part of your accountability and your loyalty and your service deeply ingrained in them, they're going to do that with you. And I think that makes those short-term needs in line with these long-term efforts, right? Because the other piece of this, the stakeholder capitalism, that's a marathon, not a sprint. And you're going to have sprints. So bring your people along with you and they'll come on those sprints with you.
Yeah, I like that. Andrew, same question. When you think about balancing short-term versus long-term, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, again, just in our habitat context, a couple of things come to mind, actually. The first thing, when I think about where our clients come from, a large portion of our clients come to us through word of mouth. So they've got a family member, cousin, whatever, that's a Habitat homeowner. And so when they start looking into becoming a homeowner, they hear, oh, well, Habitat's got these programs. My cousin, went through this process. So they reach out to us for that. And I think the reason that comes to mind in terms of longevity, again, if we're investing in our client, our audience, that's going to continue to have impact down the road. When I refer to these clients, they're people that started the homeownership process 10 years ago. So they bought a Habitat house 10 years ago. Well, now 10 years later, we're getting more clients from that person because of word of mouth, because of the impact. So again, that's kind of a long view of things, I guess. And then another thing we're doing related a little bit to the financial world, the housing industry, housing prices are continuing to multiply exponentially. And so a lot of affordable housing developers, and Habitat in particular, we've started implementing a 50-year covenant, which can benefit the homeowner in terms of equity, growth, things like that. But because of the mechanisms of this covenant, it also helps keep affordable housing during that 50-year time frame. And what we're seeing, places like the Pacific Northwest, even houses that Habitat is building, considered affordable houses, are going for $600,000. And even with adjustments for cost of living out there, that's not really affordable. And so again, a lot of Habitat affiliates, a lot of other developers are trying to create covenants like this that will help, whatever the market value is at that time. There's mechanisms that bring down affordable housing just a few percentile under that resale value. So it's going to look different for every industry, but that's a snapshot of the housing industry, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. It does look different, and to your point, Catherine, it can change overnight. There can be times when the business, something happens in the business, and we need to switch from one to the other. In my experience, I find that the short-term thinking is sort of something we're really good at. We always tend to focus on the quarterly projects, the quarterly forecasts, the sales numbers, whatever it might be in business. I think that training managers to think longer term can be challenging. Even for executives, I think you might be surprised at how much executive mindset goes towards things that are relatively short term in many organizations. So I like to frame the question differently as saying, how long do you expect to be in business? And it's kind of like, whoa, that a long time. You're like, okay, well, then that's at least some percentage of our thinking and the way we act, needs to be in line with that. And so when you think about a 50-year covenant, that's a long time for most businesses to have any amount of planning or forethought, but to recognize the fact that we are absolutely having things that will impact, a very lengthy time frame. The skills that our young employees are learning that they'll carry with them for the next, several decades. The experience they have. Will the employees who are walking your halls right now while you're on this webinar, will they look back and say, this is one of the best jobs I ever had over the course of my career? And if not, why not? What's preventing that from happening? Because it's going to happen when they get to the end of their own retirement. They look back and reflect on the work that they had. Will your organization be the one that they remember? And this is sort of the way that I like to frame that. The internal impact, I think is important to highlight that transparency that you mentioned, Catherine, and just say, hey, there's a time where something has happened. We lost our biggest customer, or they're having a problem. Let's say we developed a problem. We need all hands on deck, or use your favorite, overused analogy here, and say, we have to do something short term or something in this way. People will go there with you, to your point, Catherine. If you've built that relationship and that reputation, people understand, so we can be transparent about that when we need it. It's harder otherwise. One of the things I think that popped open to me when I was looking at the Menti results is we saw a lot of commonality in how we're communicating purpose and impact. I saw a lot of newsletters, social media, a little bit of town halls, but I wonder if you might each weigh in for me here a little bit. Andrew, we'll start with you when it comes to communicating our impact, our purpose, these types of things. What comes to mind for you with how we might consider doing that better or even at all, based on some of the responses I saw?
Yeah, so this is one of the fun parts of the learning and development world, which I'm assuming we've probably got some of those people on the call. I see this across the board, whether it's for-profit or a nonprofit. A lot of businesses or organizations put a lot of effort into their vision, mission, and values, which is excellent. Like we do need to be driving with that. But the disconnect is how we translate VMV into the manager level in particular, and then kind of that all staff level. And so when we're thinking internal within our businesses or organizations, especially that middle management, there's such a struggle both with how we design our business or organization, but how we train, how we coach, and kind of push that vision, mission, and values down into the day-to-day life of our staff, our employees. And so that's something that doesn't happen by accident. It takes being intentional. And there's a lot of good resources out there now about organizational design, mechanisms that you can put in place, team charters, department charters that help translate vision, mission, and value into that kind of mid-tier Because vision, mission, and value is high level. You're up in the clouds. It's not those aren't tactical documents or statements. And so a lot of people have a hard time. Most of us don't live up in the clouds. Most of our staff or employees are down in the trenches. And so you've got to have something that translates that high level down into the day-to-day of our work. And so again, there's a lot of room for growth there. But when you do it well, boy, I've seen the fruit of that.
Nice. Catherine, go ahead. Yeah, what do you think?
Agree completely. I think core values are key to communicating your impact, both to your employees and potential hires. But to Andrew's point, it has to be an intentional living of those core values. I would start with the creation of those core values. So there's a lot of research in the world that says, hey, if you're not going to put the time and effort and energy into authentic, genuine core values that your company can live, that your employees can live, then you shouldn't have them at all. Like it's not even worth putting them on paper. Harvard Business Review has an excellent set of research on this. If you're looking for a lot more, if you want to geek out about core values like I have in the past, there's lots of ways to do that. Having said that, one thing that we do with our core values then is each of our team members align their goals to those core values. So here's a value, here's a goal specifically to my role that is helping the company live out these core values. And if your core values are about your impact in the world, then you've come sort of full circle, right? So I do think core values are a key piece to that. You're checking in every time you're having a one-to-one on those core values, you're aligning goals around them, and then you're hiring based on those core values as well.
I love the points that you're both making, because it's like we put them on the walls, we put them on the coffee mug, but how do we get them into the mindset? How do we get that connective tissue to our actual day to day? And I find that managers get so caught up in the heat of just trying to produce whatever the business is trying to produce, they don't always stop to think about that. And then when somebody you see in the exit interview, they just come up with other reasons. But when you go a little deeper and they get real with you and they say, I just didn't feel the connection. I didn't feel the spark, working here, and this other opportunity sounds like something else. And you're like, oh no, we didn't make the translation. We didn't make that connection because we worked so hard on the core values. We may actually even genuinely want those things, but if we didn't, sort of actualize them or help you feel that connection, that's really on us as managers to help you see that if you don't see it on your own. And we can't always count on employees to just divine that on their own. Yeah.
That's right. And to add to that, we're at a very interesting place in the history of, at least speaking in a North American context, of business or nonprofits. There's a lot of well-known nonprofits or businesses that are reaching their 40, 50-year mark. And if you look, we talk about the employee life cycle. A lot of us in the HR world, we think of an employee life cycle, but think of a business life cycle or an organization life cycle. And we're at that weird place where a lot of companies are rebranding. There's a lot of update happening to try to address some of the changes in our world. And it's a really pivotal, important moment, specifically with this vision, mission, and value topic. Where as we're rebranding, how we do that and how we push that down and out through the life of the organization of the business is just as important as what we're creating. So how we're delivering our vision, mission, and values is important as what we're landing on with our mission, vision, and values.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake to think the only thing that we're producing is the commercial aspects of our business. You are producing engagement or well-being, or you're sending your workers home burned out, tired, frustrated. You're sending that into their families, into their communities. We have to take responsibility for all of it, all the ripples that we're sending, not just the ones that show up on the balance sheet, right? But Andrew, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat for a second. I should say the love seat. Let me keep you on the love seat for a second here, which is talking about ethics. Ethics is something I think there's a certain tone that we're having here that it just inevitably comes together. I think we heard the passion, Catherine, in your voice when you talked about B Corps, for example, of saying, like, for you and for Kid Glove, this is how you believe business should be done for you personally. You're not going to tell other people how to live their lives or run their business, but I think it was a very principled view that you had, and inevitably it invites this kind of concept of ethics. What's the right way for us to conduct our business? So, Andrew, I wonder if you might help me make that connection a little bit more here. How should I think about ethics and how it really relates to our business model?
Yeah. So like we were talking about earlier, the consumer or the employee are very discerning in this point in history. And I think that causes that or should cause us to take the ethical dimension of our work a lot more serious. And where my mind goes with that, a quote, this is a rough paraphrase, but I think it was Brené Brown who talked about how like the leadership of the past was known by strength and power. The leadership of the present is known by knowledge and intellect, but the leader of the future is going to be known by emotional awareness and that kind of empathy that comes with that. And so as business leaders, as leaders in the nonprofit world, I think we need to be pressing into that, leaning into that how are we understanding our own role in our day-to-day work? And can we show up in a way that's more aware of the impact that we have on our staff, the impact that our staff have on our clients, that kind of relational quality, not just a heady intellectualism or a tactical, like we got to get the work done, strength, power kind of stuff. So I think there is a shift happening, and I think it's something that, again, we need to be intentional about.
Makes good
But
sense.
that impacts ethics. You can't run an ethical business if you don't have self-awareness.
Yeah,
Fair
agree.
point. Yeah, Catherine, you want to build on that?
I think one other shift that's happening is there's a lot of ways to make money out of a 9 to 5 job right now. And so I think that adds to the need to make sure the people that you're impacting feel good about how you're impacting them, right? There's that saying that people remember how you made them feel over anything else that you do with them. And to me, that boils down to leaders who have very strong emotional intelligence and are leading from a space of emotional intelligence. I genuinely believe that will reign supreme in the future of business and of leadership.
I think it's a very unfair thing we do sometimes to frontline workers where we have these internal pressures on them. We are frustrated with the numbers, the performance, blah, blah, blah. So we don't treat them 100% great. Then they deal with our customers who are not having the best day either because the world's kind of a tough place right now. We get it. And everybody's going through some stuff. So now all of a sudden they're getting it from both sides. And then we expect them to say, yeah, but you're the face of our company to our customer. We can at least get one side of that equation correct, right? And so I'll double down on that point about emotional intelligence that you're making, Catherine, because and when I'm teaching the self-aware leader, which is a course I teach at BC, it's the leadership course. And at graduate level, we always give, in addition to the predictive index, I give a pair of emotional intelligence assessments, and always trying to say, how can we raise awareness and our practice, that self-regulation that comes with emotional intelligence as well? Because it is eye-opening for those students to be like, wow, I can see where leaders that I've been exposed to in the past haven't had this, and I can see why it's critical that I have this. And I just invite everybody who's in our audience listening right now, if leaders at every level of your organization had that type of emotional intelligence, they understood, as Andrew and Catherine are suggesting, they had that as part of the core ethics, how would work be done differently? How would the results that flow from that work be done and performed differently? These are the things that we don't have to think of as pipe dreams. It's absolutely possible, and there are organizations doing it. We can count ourselves among those organizations too if we take the necessary steps. All right. Thank you both for that panel discussion. I'm going to switch gears for us here. We're going to get ready for the Q&A portion of the show. So there's, as audience members, you're going to have a chance to ask our panelists questions using the Q&A button. And while we're waiting for you to get your thoughts together there, we're also throwing a link into the chat. This is a recognition that companies are using talent optimization and techniques like this to drive better business results, like we've talked about here, through better people practices. So if you'd like to learn more about the Predictive Index, sponsor of this webinar, we'd love to be able to follow up with you, whether you have had experience with PI or whether it's something you might be interested in learning more about, client side or on the partner side. Just go ahead and let us know using that link. All right. We're going to move into the Q&A portion here. Just getting to it here. Here's our very first question. Can you talk more about how to get executive leaders to think long-term? What to do to get them to think about 5 to 10 years down the road, which can be especially tricky if they'll be retiring in that time frame. Wow, that's a great one. Who wants to take the first crack at that? Andrew, Catherine?
The number one thing that popped in my head was metrics, especially for that
Yeah.
level of executive and probably at that stage in the career. You got to prove to them why it's worth it. And I think we've given you a lot of tools during this webinar to be able to do that. But to me, it would very much come down to, hey, here's a company that did this for 5 years and here was the outcome, right? This is not something you're going to see in a quarter, but here's where we're headed. And here are the numbers that would prove that makes a lot of sense.
Good one. Yeah, the other thing I would say real quick is you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about the long term. You go there and you come back quickly. We're not saying that we need to take the executive team offline for a month and talk about this stuff, but I think having the willingness to go there and to recognize that, executives also want to leave a legacy. They want to leave their company in good hands. They don't want to see it, other than some that might say, well, if they struggle a little bit, that might make me feel good. But ideally, they want the company to be successful for a long, long time. So I think making sure that it's constructive, how we frame that long-term thinking, make sure it's seen as actionable and a good use of time, and that's not going to take a ton of time. I've seen that work sometimes with executive teams as well.
Yeah, I love
Andrew?
that. I think facilitators make a big
Mm,
difference in that world
there you go.
as well. Yeah.
Great one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually recently had the opportunity to facilitate a strategic planning session with our C-suite.
Mm,
And I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with this, but if you have a grid of short-term versus long-term, low priority versus high priority, and have them, like I use sticky notes, but have them put, important action items or concerns or challenges that we face, and then put them on that 4-box grid. It's a really eye-opening moment for leadership when they see, oh my gosh, we're treating everything like an emergency that has to be fixed tomorrow, but we don't have anything in that long-term like agenda or whatever. So even just the awareness that comes with a facilitated activity like that can be really valuable.
I had an executive coach once say, remind me that fires are fun. It's fun to put out the fires, right?
Yeah.
So you got to get around that
It makes us
sometime.
feel valuable.
Yeah.
It makes us feel like, this is my expertise. This is when I get to come in and save the day.
Mhm.
The other thing, I think it's also true that we forget how quickly time passes. I'm an experienced executive by now. You start to see my gray whiskers here, and you just realize that the last 20 years of my experience is not relevant almost at all to the next 20 years of our earliest career professionals' experience. They're going to be dealing with things that just are totally foreign to what helped me get to where I am. And so the point is simply saying that when we think longer term, what are we doing to invest in our next generation of leaders and making sure that they have the durable skills, not AI specifically, they need all that stuff too, of course, but the real durable human skills that are going to be required that we know for sure over the next, lengthy bit. And when I hear the same executives complain about lack of bench strength, I'm saying, well, what are we doing? That's long term, that we need to think about. Andrew, I've got a specific one for you here. It says you mentioned some resources to help get this started in your own organization. Can you share even any of your favorites, either online resources or maybe books, things like this?
Or in terms of maybe
I think
culture
this whole
shifts or
shift, this culture shift toward, something more holistic.
yeah, well, I don't mind plugging the predictive index. I mean, I think it's a great resource. I'm actually really enjoying your book right now too.
Oh, thank you.
I just started that recently. There's some thinking that I resonate with that I've been sitting with for a few years now as well. Oh gosh, in terms of, I think what I see, like we are what we call a strengths-based organization. A lot of our, like the Gallup Strengths Finder, that shows up in a lot of our work. And I see a lot of businesses or organizations that all are already using resources like that, or they have access to it, but they're not utilizing them to the fullest. And so go ask, what are you using already within your organization that you might be able to expand? And again, learning and development, I think, is a strategic part of that. Are you empowering your staff? Are you actually equipping them to be successful in some of these culture shift areas? Yeah, sorry, that's about as specific as I can get at this point.
I like that. And hopefully we've given you some new language too. If you're listening to the audience, you're like, I like some of these ideas, but I don't know how to describe them. Keywords like stakeholder capitalism, B corporations, these types of things can really help you find some really great resources. Catherine, I've got one for you here too. You had mentioned establishing core values before you can turn external. Where do you even begin with creating those is the question from our audience.
Yeah, I absolutely think you need to do your research first. So again, Harvard Business Review, I would tout as a place that has a lot of good core values, do's and don'ts. Patrick Lencioni has a lot of good core values, do's and don'ts. It doesn't take a lot of searching, and just make sure you're hanging on, reputable companies, predictive index. I mean, one of those, absolutely, do your research first. And then the other thing that you'll see in a lot of that research is this is not a entire company project to create core values. And I think that's so tempting to want to include your whole team because of what it is, right? It's something that you want your whole company to live. But a very key piece of all research that I ever read was determine who those key stakeholders are that are going to come alongside you on this process. And it has to be all of your leadership team because they have to live it, right? It's like everything else Andrew is talking about. It's great if you have them, but if your leaders are not exhibiting those qualities, then they aren't actually core values.
That's a great point.
And let me add to that as well. I've been through 2 rounds of this now in different employer settings, but there are so many good corporate consultants out there now, and those coaching roles are specifically designed to work executive leadership through creating vision, mission, and values, and that kind of organizational structure. And so look for those coaches. It's worth investing in hiring an experienced person to walk with you through that process. So don't be afraid to spend some money on those kind of resources.
Like that a lot. We're getting close to time here. I want to make sure I can get everybody off to their next meetings on time. We have one here talking about, Andrew, you had mentioned Brene Brown, past, present, and future leadership qualities. I'll see if I can remember these properly. You tell me if I'm wrong. In the past, it was strength. In the current frame, it's knowledge and intelligence. And in the future, it will be emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's my paraphrase of her. So I hope that's faithful to her sentiments, but yeah,
I think it is from what I recall. And I think that the point is so clear when you think about a great example of this is as Gen Z has entered the workforce, a lot of times we're imposing outdated value systems on them. Like for myself as Gen X, it was very much a strong work ethic, kind of at all costs, you just suck it up and deal with it. And Gen Z comes in and says, well, wait a second, why do we have all this technological advancement and all these tools to help us live balanced and healthy lives? And we're like, what? What are you talking about? Well, why would anyone want to do that? And you're like, well, wait a second, hold on. We're having a values clash here. So basically just saying that in the future, when we think about more emotional intelligence, more connectivity, more holistic thinking, more inclusion, more belonging, more every organization, every business, is and will always be a people business. We have to recognize that a rehumanization of our organizations is necessary to offset all of this self-interest and technological sort of focus that we've had for way too long, in my opinion. Thank you so much, Andrew and Catherine, for your contributions on the panel. The audience Q&A, always my favorite part of the show because it's just great to hear from the audience. We'll go ahead and pull back up the slides if we can, Rachel. We're going to talk about some of the key takeaways. And before we do that, we always have this opportunity where people are like, is that it? We were just getting started. Well, if you want to continue the conversation, you can certainly do that. We've got a Zoom poll if you'd like to join us for this month's mastermind session with myself. If you'd like to be in a private group setting, you can go ahead and let us know if you'd like to be considered for an invitation to that. I think I jumped the gun because we even have one more slide that talks about some of the quotes we've had from last month. You don't have to take my word for it. People are getting value from having conversation, mostly with one another. Most of my job is to facilitate the conversation, but we really like to have all the professionals who are on this webinar who volunteer to come in, talk to one another, give advice. We all have such great experiences to share and support to share. So I love facilitating those group coaching sessions. So that's the poll for you that's up on your screen. We'll go ahead and go to the next one, where to find our panelists. So you can see on the screen, you'll get this in the follow-up information, and you'll get the LinkedIn here in the chat as well if you'd like to follow the contributions for Andrew, for Catherine, for myself, active on LinkedIn. and you'll be able to follow up with us if you have any specific questions that we didn't get to have a chance to talk about. We also have some promotions from our panelists. Andrew wants to point out that Habitat homeowners and their families have better financial health, parents who are more confident about meeting families' needs, and even improved grades for children after purchasing a Habitat home. So you can check out some of the statistics that are on the screen, and he is encouraging you to visit Habitat for Humanity Omaha's website to learn more about Habitat in general and find your nearest affiliate, even if it doesn't happen to be the awesome one that's in Omaha. And the link will also be in your follow-up email. For Catherine, Kid Glove is launching a nonprofit branding book. So it's important to be able to position and get all the great stuff that you're doing out there. You can get a free copy and early access to exclusive tips. You'll get this link in your follow-up for kidglove.com/freebook. And for myself, I have my latest monthly LinkedIn newsletter edition where I teach you what it takes to overcome the growing backlash against all things corporate. Corporate's a 4-letter word now in many circles. I teach you how to overcome that. So there you go. Very much appreciate that. And those links, again, will be in your follow-up email. We have a book giveaway winner every month. I'd like to do that. Beth Lorenzen. Beth, hope you're still on the call. Congratulations. You win a copy of the book. I'll be very happy to send you a signed copy of that guy. And last but not least, we have a template for you. We always try to do a tip sheet. This month, we've done something a little bit different. We have a template that you can encourage. I saw some of the questions in there we didn't have a chance to get to about managers, how to make sure they're connecting people to values and trying to strengthen those connections to how we're benefiting stakeholders. This is a one-on-one meeting template you can use. We've created it as a Google Doc, so you can just make a copy of it, or you can download it if you're a Microsoft Word type person. And go ahead and share that with your manager so they can incorporate some of this into their one-on-ones. I find managers a lot of times want to have conversation starters. They just don't know how to start those conversations. So this can help them. So hopefully you'll get some value out of that. And then last but certainly not least, would love to have you join us next month. We're going to be talking all about accountability and the specific superpower that it is. That'll be on Wednesday, April 9th at 2 p.m. Hope to see you there. Tell all your friends. We love to provide great information for you. So I'll let you get off to your next meetings, but thanks so much to the Predictive Index for sponsoring the webinar as always. Biggest thanks for Andrew, for Catherine, sharing your time and your wisdom and your insights with us. Really appreciate it. I know the audience took some great things away. Such an important conversation. So really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. That's it, everybody. Thank you again, as always, for joining Perspectives, our webinar series. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next month. Bye, all.